figure was standing in the middle of the road, long before my headlights reached it. But somehow I didn't notice it until I was almost on top of it. I slammed on the brakes so hard that everything on the passenger seat flew onto the floor. The tires slid across the wet pavement before the truck finally stopped. My heart pounded as I stared through the windshield, expecting someone to run away or wave apologetically after crossing the highway without looking. Instead, the road ahead was completely empty. Rain continued falling beneath the headlights. The white lane markings stretched into the darkness. There wasn't a single person anywhere in sight. I stayed frozen behind the steering wheel for nearly a minute, trying to convince myself I'd imagined the entire thing. Fatigue does strange things during long drives. I'd been on the road for almost 8 hours after finishing a construction job in another county, and the only thing on my mind was getting home before sunrise. The highway cut through miles of dense forest where radio stations faded into static and cell service disappeared without warning. There were no nearby towns, no gas stations, and almost no traffic after midnight. It was the kind of road people only used because there wasn't another option. I took a slow breath, shifted the truck back into gear, and continued driving. The windshield wipers swept steadily across the glass, keeping pace with the rain. I checked the mirrors several times, half expecting to see someone standing behind the truck after all. Nothing appeared except darkness swallowing the road I'd already traveled. About 15 minutes later, I noticed the first road sign. It wasn't unusual by itself. It simply read Pine Creek, 12 miles. The strange part was that I distinctly remembered passing the same sign nearly half an hour earlier. I even remembered the bent corner where someone had apparently hit it years ago. I looked at the dashboard clock, wondering if exhaustion had caused me to lose track of time. The numbers looked normal. My fuel gauge hadn't moved much either. Still, something about the highway suddenly felt unfamiliar. The trees seemed taller than before. The darkness beyond my headlights appeared unusually deep, as though the forest absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. I turned up the radio for company, but every station dissolved into soft static. Then, between bursts of interference, I heard what sounded like a weather report. The announcer calmly advised drivers to avoid traveling after midnight because of heavy fog expected across the region. I glanced ahead. There wasn't any fog, only rain. The broadcast cut off before I heard the station name. A few miles later, the rain stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The windshield cleared, revealing a perfectly straight stretch of road, disappearing into darkness. That's when I noticed another vehicle ahead. An old sedan drove perhaps 200 yards in front of me. Its taillights glowed faintly red through the night. Relief washed over me. Seeing another driver somehow made everything feel normal again. I maintained a steady distance for several minutes, never gaining or falling behind. Eventually, I realized something odd. I couldn't make out the sedan's license plate. That wasn't unusual by itself, but neither brake lights nor turn signals ever activated. The car maintained exactly the same speed without drifting even slightly within its lane. It moved with an almost unnatural steadiness. Curious, I accelerated. The distance between us never changed. I accelerated again. My speedometer climbed, but the sedan remained exactly the same distance ahead as though attached to my truck by an invisible cable. Then it rounded a gentle bend in the highway and disappeared behind a line of trees. I followed only seconds later. The road beyond was completely empty. No side roads, no driveways, no intersections. The sedan had simply vanished. I slowed almost to a stop and searched both sides of the highway. Nothing. The forest stood silent beneath the moonlight that had finally broken through the clouds. I laughed quietly, more out of nervousness than amusement, and reminded myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe the car had turned onto a logging road I hadn't noticed. Maybe the darkness had hidden it. Those explanations felt believable enough until I reached another road sign. Pine Creek, 12 miles. The same bent corner, the same weathered paint, the same missing bolt near the bottom. This time I pulled onto the shoulder and stepped out of the truck. The night air felt strangely still. No wind moved through the trees, no insects chirped. Even the distant sound of wildlife seemed absent. I walked toward the sign and ran my hand across the cold metal. It was real. I took a picture with my phone before climbing back into the truck. As I pulled away, I checked the image. The photograph showed only an empty roadside. The sign wasn't there. I stopped again and looked through the windshield. The sign stood exactly where I'd left it. I took another picture. Again, the photograph showed nothing except trees and darkness. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I decided not to stop again. Whatever was happening, I wanted to keep moving. About 20 minutes later, I saw headlights approaching from the opposite direction. They remained distant for an unusually long time, never seeming to get closer despite both vehicles moving toward one another. Finally, the oncoming truck passed me. I glanced at the driver out of habit. He was looking directly at me with an expression that wasn't fearful or surprised, only tired, as though he'd been driving for days. As our vehicles crossed, he lifted one hand from the steering wheel and pointed behind me instead of waving. I instinctively checked my rearview mirror. The highway behind my truck stretched empty beneath the moonlight. When I looked forward again, the other truck had disappeared. There was nowhere it could have gone. The road remained perfectly straight for miles. I told myself I would drive until sunrise, without stopping, no matter what else happened. That promise lasted less than 10 minutes. A woman appeared standing beside the highway holding a flashlight. She wasn't waving it or signaling for help. She simply stood at the edge of the pavement wearing an old raincoat despite the rain having stopped long ago. As I approached, she slowly raised the flashlight until it pointed directly toward my windshield. The beam wasn't bright enough to blind me, but it forced me to slow down. I rolled past without stopping. She never looked at my truck. She kept staring farther down the road behind me. In my mirror, she remained motionless until darkness swallowed her completely. That's when my phone rang. There was no signal, yet somehow the call connected. The screen displayed unknown number. I answered without speaking. For several seconds, only silence filled the line. Then a calm voice said, "You missed the turn." Before I could respond, the call ended. I pulled over immediately and checked my maps. The GPS showed my truck sitting in the middle of an empty gray screen. No roads, no towns, no location marker. Only a small blue arrow floating in blank space. I restarted the phone. The map returned to normal. According to the display, I was still on the highway I'd been following all night. I continued driving, but something had changed. The road no longer felt endless. Instead, it felt repetitive. Every few miles, I passed the same broken guardrail, the same abandoned mailbox leaning beside the pavement. the same fallen pine tree lying just beyond the shoulder. I began counting mile markers. The numbers increased normally until marker 127. The next sign also read 127. So did the next. And the next. I never reached 128. By then, dawn should have been approaching, yet the eastern horizon remained completely dark. My dashboard clock read 5:41 a.m. It had displayed the same time for over an hour. I switched it off and relied on my wristwatch instead. The watch read 2:18 a.m. I no longer trusted either of them. Eventually, I noticed another vehicle parked on the shoulder ahead. An older pickup truck with its hazard lights flashing. A man stood beside it, looking underneath the hood. This time I decided to stop. As I approached, he looked relieved to see another person. Before I could ask if he needed help, he said something that made my blood run cold. "Have you been seeing the signs too?" I stared at him. He pointed down the road toward another weathered sign reading Pine Creek, 12 miles. He laughed nervously. "I've passed that thing at least 6 times tonight." I asked how long he'd been there. His expression changed. "I don't know anymore," he admitted quietly. We stood together beside the road, listening to the silence surrounding the forest. Then we both heard it. An engine, somewhere far away, growing slowly louder. We looked in opposite directions, but saw no headlights. The sound approached anyway, echoing through the trees as though a vehicle traveled beside the highway instead of on it. Neither of us spoke until the engine noise faded into the distance again. The man climbed back into his truck without another word. I returned to mine. We drove away in opposite directions. I watched his tail lights shrink behind me until they disappeared around a curve. A few minutes later, I rounded the same curve myself. His truck was gone. The road stretched empty once more. Just before sunrise, or what I hoped was sunrise, the forest suddenly ended. Houses appeared, traffic lights, a gas station, a familiar intersection only 15 minutes from my home. Everything looked completely normal. I pulled into the station and asked the cashier what time it was. She glanced at the clock above the register. 2:23, she replied. According to the dashboard, I'd been driving for nearly 7 additional hours. According to everyone else, only 5 minutes had passed since I should have reached town. I never found an explanation. Months later, I searched online for others who had driven that highway after midnight. I found scattered stories about repeating road signs, disappearing vehicles, and phone calls from unknown numbers telling drivers they had missed a turn. None of the stories matched exactly, but one detail appeared often enough to bother me. Almost every person who described the road mentioned seeing someone standing ahead in their headlights before the strange events began, someone who disappeared before they could reach them. Even now, whenever I drive at night, I pay close attention to distant figures on empty roads. If I ever see someone standing perfectly still in the middle of the highway again, I won't slow down to find out whether they're really there. Because sometimes I wonder if I actually avoided hitting someone that night, or if noticing them was the reason I never truly left that stretch of road in the first place.